What's up, Ente? What's up, Raza? Want to do a quick review of Juneteenth and why it should matter to Raza, and especially Chicanos living in the Southwest and Tejas and those states. And for those of you who don't know, Juneteenth, which actually is a day that's recognized now as a federal holiday, was not always what people, were saying it was not always what especially white history or historians were painting it out to be, especially if they were, hiding behind those hoods, at night, putting on their bed sheet or Ku Klux Klan outfit. But just the short of it is this: Juneteenth, known as Juneteenth, basically, it commemorates June 19th, 1865, the day enslaved African Americans in Galveston, Texas, finally received word that the Civil War had ended and that they were free. Now, think about that, everybody. You have people, human beings, who are black, like many of the people who built this country. They're people of color, indigenous, Mexicanos, Asians, Chinese, um, and African Americans, or people who came from Africa, right? They built this country. And here's a group of people who this war was being fought over at the time. They were the subject, and even the North, led by Abraham Lincoln, even the North hadn't told them, informed them that they were now free. The reason why this history has always bothered me is because not only did Black people help build this country, the power that this country has today, the status, is due to free slave labor, a human rights violations. If you want to, if you could ever document any of them, there they are right in front of you. So the wealth of this nation and the status of this nation is owed to the Black people who were already here, forced to work for free, and indigenous people and others, but especially them who learn at the last minute. Here's what happened though during Juneteenth. One, you had delayed emancipation. That meant that, like I said, although the President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation took effect January 1863, that's 2 years prior, the news did not immediately reach the remote enslaved populations of Texas. They were isolated, yes, largely, and untouched by fighting, but this state had even had a haven for slavery, and in other words, it was a haven for slaves. Remember, people, Texas used to be part of Mexico. Mexico specifically ended slavery under Vicente Guerrero, who is actually the first black president in the Americas, or at least, Mexico. From Barack Obama, he was the first black president, and he was in Mexico. He ended slavery. He helped end slavery. There's a story about how he was killed, but also people don't know the United States took part in some and part of that, or at least helped that assassination take place. So they, going back to Juneteenth, uh, Vicente Guerrero had got rid of slavery, but Texas, the reason why Americans going west fought for Texas, because they wanted a slave state, and Mexico told them no. Now that whole fight took place in the 1840s up until 1848, when the war finally ended. The United States took Texas, California, and all this other territory from Mexico, and some of these states did become slave-owning states, including Texas. So that shows you the inhumanity, the mistreatment of people, and the motives of those who wanted to enslave Black people, which is basically free labor. And if you think about it today, in today's terms, farm labor, for example, a lot of people don't realize, but a lot of these farm workers who are undocumented, they're actually working slave wages, and the vast majority of those people are from South America, Latin America, Mexico, for example. They're today's modern slaves in many ways out in the fields, and they make this country wealthy. What they say, California, the third richest economy in the world. Again, farm labor, not chips, computer chips, not football, not Disneyland, not Hollywood. It's agriculture. And so that slavery is still taking place today. And if you look at the prisons around the country, going back to Juneteenth, you still got slavery under those prison systems where people are prosecuted. They're just like the Carmelo Anthony case in Texas, speaking about unfair juries and unfair judges and unfair trials in 2026. Black people are sent to prison And disproportionately, what that means is the vast majority of the people in there are black, even though their numbers are lower than the vast majority, of their counterparts, like whites, for example. And this goes also for sentencing and punishment for drug laws, things like that. So Juneteenth was a day that was a slap in the face to Black Americans, to people already living here, the Black community, our Black brothers and sisters. It was a slap in the face to the people there. And I want to go back to something Abraham Lincoln is credited with doing, having done, and that's freed the slaves, because he issued this Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 saying all slaves are free. But that is not true. That is a lie, gente. That is a lie, just like a lot of the lies that have been used against us in the Chicano community, in the Mexicano community, those of us who from Latin American countries. Martin Luther King, he fought, but what picture do they paint of him? A happy-go-lucky, let's hold hands and turn the other cheek kind of Martin Luther King, but they never show you the other side, right? Well, the same thing they do for us and our heroes, right? If you go back to Pancho Villa wasn't the best person in the world, but the guy definitely wanted to get back to the poor. But they painted him out to be a criminal for years, right? So Juneteenth is important because it hid the truth from the people. But more important is because Abraham Lincoln didn't free a single slave. During the Emancipation Proclamation, he said only the slave states, in other words, slave owning states who had slaves who had broken off from the United States at the time, it's called a Confederate. He said that they were in violation of that. But what about the northern states who had slaves? He did not include them. And he himself is cited as saying, if I could end the Civil War without freeing a single slave, I would do that. He said that. He said he would do that, but he didn't want to. He chose the other route. They played games with us and our Black brothers and sisters. And Juneteenth was a slap in the face to a lot of Black people because they had already, many of them had already heard the news, but not a lot. And those people are already there, who were working for free. They were never compensated. The truth is, when it comes to reparations, I do think Black people should get reparations. I do think so. And I do think so should Native people, Indigenous people, and all those people who've been wronged. As a matter of fact, I think, the world powers, the rich people, whether it be the United States or all of them included, Great Britain, all these rich, powerful countries, they should give reparations to all the countries, whether it be India, whether it be Africa, whether it be Latin America, whether it be indigenous people here in the United States, the slaves who were forced and brought here by force during the slave trade, they should be given reparations, but they never will. They'll just allow a white man, a racist white man from South Africa to become the first trillionaire, therefore Elon Musk. So Juneteenth, I'm going back to that, is it's a sad day in a way, but at the same time, when as a history teacher you look at the history of the Black community, they've been celebrating Juneteenth. A lot of people are saying, "Yay, Biden signed the Juneteenth as a federal holiday in 2021 when he's in office," right? But they forget Biden put half the people in prison because of his laws, his get tough on crime bills of the 1980s, and his racist views. This is a Democrat. People think they're not racist. Oh yeah, he was one of the biggest white supremacist racists. Because of his racist views, a lot of Black men and brown men are stuck in prison over things like marijuana, something that he pardoned his son over, drugs, right? They're in prison over simple things like marijuana because this, these laws, you would think they're dealing with serious laws, but no, they're talking about marijuana laws. He is one of the architects or one of the persons that made that possible. So don't give him a pass. Black people were already celebrating Juneteenth long before Biden signed that. That was their community. And so why should we as Chicanos care? Number one, because they are our allies. They are our comrades. Despite the foolishness you hear from people who are stuck on stupid, they're stuck on stupid, whether it be on TikTok, whatever, Instagram. Black people and Chicanos and Mexicanos have always been comrades, have always been allies, and should be, and should continue, and it shouldn't end then. Their raza, we should have a camaraderie, solidarity with all people of the world, whether they be Black and yes, even white, Asian, you name it, Arab, Muslim. It doesn't matter. we should have that camaraderie. We should have solidarity with these communities, but especially the ones that have been oppressed, especially the ones who built up this country and give it the wealth that it did. So we cannot turn our backs on them. My experience, especially the ones who are revolutionary, black brothers and sisters, they have never turned their back on us. And I know that for a fact. So I continue to work with a lot of them, whether it be as a brown beret, La Raza Unida Partido or Raza Unida, or just as an individual, they have never turned their back on us. And especially their organized revolutionary cadres, they have never, and we should never turn our back on them because going back to Juneteenth and what years prior to that, Vicente Guerrero of Mexico, the first black president, did. No, they saw that coming. They saw that slavery had to be done away with. And here, the United States, when it did have a chance to do away with it, they delayed this right to people. And some people continue to work as black slaves even after the fact. And many of them had to scatter. Nobody was certain about what was happening. So don't give Biden a pass. Don't give America a pass. This is something black people have been celebrating. And return that favor if you volunteer or you do something, or many of us who have biracial, whether it be children or relatives, hey, make sure that they know the true history of both sides, and especially the black history, because unfortunately they are not going to get that under the Trump administration. Heads up, everybody, the Trump administration is trying to stupefy America by getting rid of the education department. What will that mean? Think about it. They're already getting rid of black history, Chicano history. They're taking names off and they're changing facts. So they're rewriting it into white supremacy history. And now their efforts to get rid of the Department of Education shows how backwards they are. They'll never be on our side. So we have to be on each other's side because, like, I forget who said it. If we don't hang, if we don't hang together, we're gonna hang individually when they catch us, right? So we gotta hang together. We gotta stick together. Our black brothers and sisters on this Juneteenth day. Aho, I'm out.